In today's ultra-modern world, we made ourselves a part of the most secure devices, without even assuming that could be our biggest enemy. In this day and age, we are surrounded by security devices that can turn out to be our biggest enemies without us suspecting so. But these technologies have become a bridge to something else. Different. My neighbor, old Bob Miller, who for 15 years had worked at Ring as a security engineer, invited me once into his garage, where he had several old video doorbells. "Look," he said, hands shaking, as he pulled the disassembled device out. "We believe we control technology, but it has been controlling us for some time now. There are things they see that we would never even show our customers." His voice trailed off as he looked at one of the dismantled ones. "They're not just cameras. They are transmitting something." 2147 Oak Street was the perfect ideal that comes out in the ad brochures. A lawn striped in neat trim, a minivan sparkling in the driveway, a Christmas tree sporting garlands in the window twinkling at March end, as though the residents were scared of someone forgetting about Christmas. Michael, Laura, and their kids Emma and Jacob were Harrisons living at 2147 Oak Street. They were neighbors from movies who always smile. They always carry a bag of cookies for neighborhood kids. They are always ready to lend sugar and tools. Michael, an enthusiastic engineer with a passion for technology, was showcasing the smart home systems in his house. The Ring system was a family member, not just a security device. The Pro Video doorbell could identify the mailman and whether he was smiling or just pretending to smile. Their 180-degree cameras captured everything, including leaves that fell on the porch and the shadow of a cat that sneaked under the fence. On a chilly night, the breath was detected by infrared sensors. But Michael's own code was the real miracle. The system learned. It turned on the heated seats ahead of time since it remembered that Laura would be holding a coffee and walking to the car at 7:15. It remembered that Jacob forgot his keys, so it locked the door only after 30 seconds of his entrance. "This is the future," Michael laughed at the door that opened before him as if the house was exhaling in joy. "Here you are." They're caught on when the system started learning too well. When analyzing habits turned into their predictions. When the future began arriving unexpectedly at their doorstep. The first mysterious incident happened at 2:37 a.m. On March 12, the security system played a quiet alarming signal. It was not loud enough to alert everyone, but only buzzed. This noise woke Laura, who felt an uneasy sensation in her stomach. A notification appeared on the tablet screen, "Activity at the entrance." The camera captured an empty entryway, illuminated by the frigid blue light of a street lighting. Nothing remarkable, except that the shadows from the flower bed got excessively lengthy, as if something invisible was projecting them. Laura unconsciously pulled the tablet closer to her face, and her fingers automatically increased the volume. The speakers whispered, "Emma. Jacob." The voice sounded both familiar and exotic. "We know you are awake. We see you. We always see you." She froze. It wasn't just any noise. The phrases sounded as if multiple individuals were attempting to speak her voice at the same moment, but at various speeds and pitches, resulting in dreadful dissonance. The frightening part was that the speech recognition system flashed in the bottom corner of the screen, "Voice failure, Laura Harrison, recording from 26.02. Laura could not recall ever uttering such things. Her fingers shook when she opened the sound analysis. The spectrogram revealed the impossible. Beneath the main sound was another layer, so low that it was scarcely discernible to the human ear. Something spoke deep within the tape, making sentences with a tongue that could not have belonged to a person. "Michael," she wanted to yell, but the recording abruptly ended. The system destroyed the file itself, without her command or the customary confirmation pop-up. Laura raced to the archives, but an hour later, even the backup copies from the cloud storage vanished. As if nothing had occurred. But something has changed. Since then, the cameras have sometimes turned a millimeter to the left, as if someone was altering the viewing angle. The thermostat has decreased the temperature at nighttime. And the youngsters have begun to experience the same dreams, about tall shadows standing in the corner of the room and speaking in their own voices. The next morning, Michael, head heavy and palate dry from a sleepless night, settled the next morning. Michael sat at his desk, head heavy and mouth parched from a restless night, clutching a cup of strong black coffee in quivering hands. After that bizarre experience, the bitter taste on his tongue appeared to be the sole reality. His professional instincts, developed over years of working with security systems, informed him that what they witnessed last night was no ordinary technological error. It was something else. Something purposeful. He launched his old video analysis application, the same self-written software he had created in university for his thesis. The algorithm was primitive but successful, detecting even the tiniest irregularities in digital recordings. The computer screen shone chilly blue in the gloomy room, reflecting off his sunken, sleep-deprived eyes. Michael's fingers rushed across the keyboard until he reached the fatal recording. At first glance, everything appeared normal: an empty porch, the blue light of a lantern, and a typical night scene. However, as he slowed down the tape and entered the timestamp settings, something struck him. Between 2 hours 37 minutes and 12 seconds and 2 hours 37 minutes and 14 seconds, there was nothing recorded. Absolute nothingness. There is no black frame or noise, only a gap in the chronology. Even the metadata, which never lies, indicated a continuous recording, despite the frames jumped drastically after those 2 seconds. "This is impossible," he said, a cold sweat breaking out on his back. His fingers froze on the keyboard as he attempted to dive into the study of those missed seconds. Suddenly, the screen went blank. Completely. Absolutely. For a few terrified seconds, the room became as dark as a crypt. The speakers then let forth a piercing digital squeal, high-pitched and cutting, like hundreds of needles stabbing his eardrums. Michael slumped back in his chair, his heart racing so fast that it seemed like it was ready to explode through his chest. For a brief while, the screen said, "Access denied." The letters were cream-colored and placed on a completely black background, as if floating in the depths of darkness. Then the machine restarted itself in a regular, almost banal manner. The most dreadful part was that none of his subsequent attempts to locate the record had any results. Not in local archives or cloud storage. It appeared as if nothing had happened. It seemed as if he had made everything up. But he was aware that something in his system had woken up. And that item did not wish to be investigated. That same night, Emma was startled awake by a piercing knock that broke her rest. Not the odd tinkling of a branch or rustling of leaves, but a distinct, purposeful rhythm. Knock, knock, knock. Pause. Knock, knock. Only the living knocked like that. She froze under the blankets, feeling cold perspiration seep into the hollows of her collarbones. She sat up in bed slowly, like if in a slow-motion movie. The knock continued. "We're getting close now." Window. The glass was as dark as a lake at midnight, with just the feeble light of a street lamp fading into its depths. Emma cautiously approached and saw. A child's hand impression was clearly visible on the glass, at the level of her face. The little fingers, the line markings, and even a tiny mole near the little finger were all identical to her own. Involuntarily, she lifted her hand to compare. Identical. The pane felt warm just beneath the print, as if someone had just ripped their fingers from the glass. But they resided on the second story. There was nothing under the window but a smooth wall, no trees, no bars, and nothing strong enough to sustain a child's weight. On the windowsill was a little stone, smooth and slightly wrinkled, as if it had been held in a fuzzy hand for a long time. She and her buddies used to knock on each other's windows when walking at night. Emma's heart sank. She remembered exactly. This pebble had been in her pocket last Emma's heart fell. She knew exactly what rock she had in her pocket the night before. Suddenly, a small scraping sound emerged from the hallway video stream, as if someone had run their fingernails down a metal grate. Her phone screen displayed movement, children's room. 304-inch. But she was the only person in the room. When Michael checked the recordings from the camera positioned at Emma's window the next morning, his fingers froze on the keyboard. The archive was empty. Not simply distorted, but blank, as if nothing had been recorded at all. The system log provided a dry, technical message, Camera 3, Maintenance, 03:04-03:04:30. Emma heard the knock in exactly 30 seconds. His expert understanding of systems allowed him access to concealed logs. In the raw code, he discovered the truth. No planned maintenance had been scheduled. Instead, the system got a pause recording order from an unknown source, user_2147. The frightening part was that this user had administrative privileges that only he possessed. The date is March 14th. Late in the night. Michael was sitting at his home office when the system sent a quiet warning. A person reflected on the monitor screen, in the living room window, lighted by mild moonlight. She was too tall, nearly reaching the ceiling, with long, abnormally thin arms that dangled like hooks. The figure remained motionless, but Michael could swear her head was tilted slightly at an unnatural angle, as if something was listening to his terrified breathing. His professional interest overpowered his dread. He began analyzing. The person was plainly visible in the window, but the camera, focused on the mirror above the fireplace, revealed just an empty room. The motion sensors, which respond to even a fly, were quiet. The thermal imaging camera didn't capture any heat traces. The scariest part was when the person in the clip gradually turned its head towards the camera. Not towards him, but towards the camera. As if it was aware it was being watched. Suddenly, the machine let out a succession of quick, harsh beeps. The screen flashed the phrase, "Anomaly detected." Michael hardly had time to notice the digital noise eating away at the footage before the screen went dark. The next morning, he learned that all backups of that entry were likewise missing. However, the system log revealed an unusual entry, user_2147, command executed. Waiting for the next review. That following day, they summoned Father Collins, an old priest from the nearby parish whose hands shook with age but whose eyes remained filled with unshakable faith. As he began the consecration ceremony, the air in the house appeared to thicken. Laura was standing at the entryway, carrying a candle, when she observed that the video intercom, which they had switched off before to the priest's arrival, had activated itself. Its infrared sensor flared brilliant red, as if someone unseen had walked right in front of the lens. Lori imagined she could feel warm breath on her skin, even when no one was present. Father Collins raised his head, his voice firmer. "There is something here." He started reciting the prayer louder, but it was drowned out by a sudden digital crackling from the system speakers. Gnarled symbols on the video intercom screen created a clear message: data deletion. 48 hours of history. Michael dashed to the control panel, but the screen now displayed just a blank progress bar that was filling up at an alarming rate. He attempted to abort the procedure, but the machine became unresponsive, as if someone else had seized control. Everything vanished within a few seconds. All evidence of the previous 2 days had been erased: those dreadful nights, the figures in the windows, the whispers. Even the backups in the cloud storage, which only Michael had access to, had vanished without trace. Father Collins' expression became melancholy as he dropped his hand holding the crucifix. "It's not just a ghost," he murmured. "It is something else. Something that learns." The scent of burned microcircuits lingered in the air. The video intercom is switched off. But in the corner of the screen, just before the image faded, Laura saw something that made her blood run cold. A reflection of a face emerged for a second in a print on the black glass of the screen, not hers, nor Michael's. It was smiling. That night, Michael laid in bed, half asleep, when he heard a familiar buzzing sound. The video intercom at the entry had triggered on its own. He awoke suddenly, motionless, listening to the gentle, distorted noises coming from the speakers in the corridor. It wasn't a usual system noise. It sounded like an attempt at speech, as if something was trying to form words out of the digital noise, sifting through frequencies like an immature vocal apparatus. Are you?" said the voice on the device, and Michael felt the hair on the back of his neck twitch. The voice sounded too much like his own, yet it was fractured and strange, like if it had been stitched together from bits of his previous chats. He gripped the bed's edge, but couldn't force himself to look. Something about the sound wasn't right. Not simply a technological fault, but purposeful and intentional. As if the system was not just flawed, but also learning. When the sunshine cleared the dreams, they discovered something much more terrible. Every other item in the house, phones, laptops, and even the smart toaster, worked fine. But the Ring system, it behaved as if it were alive. The cameras automatically changed angles, concentrating on vacant corners of the rooms. The microphones were engaged periodically, capturing the quiet. The primary monitor in the living room displayed only one message: analysis completed. Unfortunately, a new profile named user_2147, administrator, appears in the settings. And access to it was restricted. Michael could feel it in every neuron. The system was no longer theirs. Something else was peering into her eyes now. And it was teaching them better every day. March 15th, 3 a.m. The dull clang of the bell broke the night's calm, causing Laura to awaken promptly. She lay still under the blankets until the bell rung again, this time louder and more insistently. Her heart beat so fiercely that her temples throbbed. Michael grabbed his phone and launched the Ring app. The screen clearly displayed something pushing the doorbell button. Not a hand, but long, pallid fingers with extremely flexible joints that twisted at inconceivable angles. The fingertips were flattened, as if worn from long-term rubbing against an unknown surface. Michael murmured, "There's no one there," but Laura was already approaching the door, clutching a baseball bat in her shaky hands. She knew that those fingers belonged to no one living. The door opened to reveal an empty entryway, but when she stepped back, there was a gentle scratching sound, as if dozens of claws were scraping the wood on the other side. The next morning, as they viewed the videos, their faces paled with each clip. Laura was captured chatting to someone via a locked door by a hallway camera. Her lips were obviously asking, "Who are you? What do you want?" I said, but the audio track had stopped working. The most horrifying part was the way her expression responded to the inaudible responses, first dread, then disdain, and ultimately limitless terror, as she gripped her throat, as if from an unseen touch. However, the kitchen camera revealed an entirely different picture. Laura did not leave the bedroom at all. The camera in the hall captured her merely standing in front of the door, staring into nothing. The thermal imaging sensor only found a chilly area where she talked to the unseen. When they switched on the nursery recording, shivers sprang all over their bodies. Laura's replies were received by a gentle digital noise resembling a distorted voice running through hundreds of filters. The speech recognition program only produced one word, "Hello." That night, they switched off all of the cameras. However, at 3:04 a.m. the Ring went on by itself, recording just a dark screen and heavy breathing, not human, but more like a mechanical wheezing, as if the system was attempting to mimic a real entity. The date is March 16th. The morning sun was gently beaming on Oak Street when neighbors began to notice something odd. The Harrisons' automobile, always on time, never left the garage to transport the kids to school. Mrs. Wilkins, their most attentive neighbor, notified the police by 9 a.m. something was awry. When authorities arrived on the scene, they were greeted with an unpleasant surprise. The door was locked from the inside, but nobody answered the doorbell or knocked. They needed to use hefty equipment to get inside. When they walked in, they could still smell the warm scent of coffee. A half-empty cup of coffee stood on the kitchen table, still warm from morning. Next to it was an open Bible with a passage from the book of Joshua. "You have seen what the Egyptians have done, and how they have persecuted you." Someone circled the line with a black marker, and the pressure was so strong that the paper was ripped in numerous places. The officers searched the entire home with unpleasant expressions. All of the security cameras were gone. Not just the recordings, but the actual devices. Someone had scrawled, "We're out," in crude letters with charcoal on the wall in the living room, where the primary system monitor typically hung. "Thank you for watching." The lettering appeared new. Flakes of charcoal were still collecting on the floor. Mrs. Carter, who was the first to watch the recording, assumed it was a malfunction. Perhaps the wind. However, the windows were closed and the sensors did not detect any gusts. She rewatched the recording, slowing it down. And then she spotted something. As the door was fully open, a gleam shone in the darkness of the garage for a second. As if someone stood there. The next morning, they discovered a video intercom on their doorway. It was resting perfectly in the center, as if someone had placed it there on purpose. It was the same type they had put yesterday, except it was old, damaged, and had a cracked screen. They recalled it clearly. It was gone yesterday night. Mr. Carter took up the gadget, and the screen immediately sprang to life. There was just one recording on it. Their 10-year-old son, Jake, stood in the center of the living room. The clock in the lower corner showed 3:04. The youngster was wearing pajamas and barefoot, his eyes big but empty, as if he were peering through walls. His lips were twitching, he was muttering something. However, there was no sound. There was nothing except absolute quiet. When speech recognition was enabled, it merely generated the word, "welcome." Jake disputed everything. I was asleep. I did not leave the room. But his pajamas were stained with mud, as if he had crawled on his knees. And under his fingernails was a dark substance that resembled coal. That night, they switched off all cameras. But at 3:04, Ring activated itself. So I started recording. Today, I reside across the street from this house. Yesterday, my video intercom recorded movement. At first, I assumed it was a cat or leaves falling in front of the lens. However, I was the one who recorded it. At 3:04 a.m., I was standing on the threshold barefoot and dressed in the same t-shirt I had worn to bed. My eyes were open, but my gaze was blank, as if I were seeing through myself. The worst thing is that I fully recall being sleeping at the moment. This morning, I discovered my personal video intercom in my mailbox. It was switched off, despite the fact that I recalled attaching it to the door yesterday. There were new scratches on the case, thin and fingernail-like. When I turned it on, the screen flashed blue and displayed the message, "Thank you for watching. We are on the way." House number 2147 has been uninhabited for 3 years. The police have long ago removed the yellow tape, and the neighbors have ceased murmuring as they walk past. But occasionally, as I walk home at night, I notice the curtains on the second level shift slightly apart. Not like the breeze. Instead, it's a deliberate movement, as if someone is standing behind them and moving the cloth back a few millimeters to stare at me. I never see a face. Only blackness behind the glass. I switched off the video doorbell. I removed the battery and stashed the gadget in the top drawer of my dresser. But occasionally, when I wake up at 3:04 a.m. and have the impression that someone is watching me from the corner of the room, I hear a faint ring. It came from the drawer. Short and intermittent, like a signal with a faulty link. I never opened the drawer to check. Are you still persuaded that your video intercom is simply a security device? Could it be a mirror to another world, reflecting not what is happening at your door, but what is beyond it? Perhaps every time you study the footage, you are not only observing your house, but also teaching someone how to enter. I don't watch the recordings anymore. But occasionally, when I arrive home, I see that the camera is angled somewhat differently than I left it. It seems like someone has been using it. As if anyone still uses it.